A very good afternoon to everyone, a good evening to everyone, and welcome to today's session where I'm going to be taking you through the MBA application process. So let me just, great. So very good evening, and I hope to keep the next 60 minutes filled with action-packed advice for you. And thank you very much for joining us, and I hope that over the next 1 hour, I'm able to clear many doubts that you may have about the MBA application process. And without much ado, I'll just go ahead and briefly introduce myself. My name is Arun. Why am I the person who is speaking over here? Well, I have been training students for the GMAT. Many of you might have seen me on the YouTube videos. I've had students who have gone on to score high on the GMAT and eventually get into a top school of their choice. So what I'm really sharing with you today is experience of having worked with applicants from fairly disadvantaged demographic, typically IT engineers, finance, operations. So we get a lot of Indian candidates, a very, very tough selection pool. So what I'm offering is from the trenches. Every year we work with students who get into some of the top schools in the world. And these are schools that I'm pretty sure many of you are aspiring for. And we help with both the GMAT aspect as well as the MBA admission bit, right? So that's really the background, and I'm going to be sharing in a bit how we can help you. There are some exciting things that we have, and we would love for you to avail such free services because we also want to see how we can demonstrate how we can help you, right? So please do reach out. I'll be letting you know specific points during the session today. Just wanted to settle ourselves down, maybe take a deep breath, right? And just try to focus on what I'm going to be saying for the next 60 minutes, because this is perhaps the most important investment that you can make in yourself, right? At least I can assure you for the whole of this week, this is probably going to be the most productive 60 minutes that you're going to have, right? So if you have other tabs open, maybe you want to just close, maybe you want to keep your phone slightly more than an arm's distance away so that you are able to create a friction and you are able to focus on what I have in store for you. With that, I just wanted to start off with this quote by Peter Drucker. As all of you are aspiring management students, I wanted to kind of reflect on this quote which says, management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things, right? So I'm pretty sure many of you have started your research on the whole MBA application process. And if you are like any normal person, you will realize very soon that there is way too much information out there, correct? And it is very hard for us to sift through this information to make sense. What I'm going to be offering to you in this session are going to be some frameworks. And these frameworks you can take and you can apply it onto your specific situation, onto your specific case. And I'm pretty sure you will be able to answer a lot of questions that may happen while we are doing the session, right? And I would like to also request if you can take a piece of paper and a pen, and if you can take a brain dump, all the questions that you have about the application process, you can maybe put it down on a piece of paper. We are going to be looking at the framework, so I hope that I'm able to preempt many of these questions. However, towards the end, we will definitely keep some time for Q&A so that I'll make sure that your questions are answered as much as possible, right? So please start off by writing it. I won't be able to look at the chat and answer questions while the session is in flow. So what do we have for you? These are some of the larger questions that I'm going to attempt to answer. The first would be, what are the application timelines? How do I really plan 2021 in the most optimized way, so that while my GMAT prep is going on, I also am figuring out what to do on the application side. So in case you have already taken the GMAT, great. The only thing that is stopping you is going to be the applications. But if you are like most people, it is still July. Maybe you thought of taking the GMAT earlier, but for whatever reasons, you are not able to do so. So even if you're preparing for the GMAT, I'll give you a sense of how to utilize the next few months of 2021 so that you can apply for an admission cycle starting 2022. I'm assuming that the audience is looking at a timeline in the next 1 year. I'll also be throwing some light. As I said, I'll be giving you some framework on how to select a target B school, what are the things that you should keep in mind, and how to get, kind of just process, because we go to websites, we see the same nice pictures and very hard to differentiate between various schools. So I'll probably touch upon the factors there. One question that I keep getting asked is, what is it that this admission committee really wants? How should I present my profile in such a way that it makes for a convincing, case, right? So that when the B school is looking at all the applicants, right, they are able to select you over others. What is it that I can build into my application? And I think I'm going to throw a little bit more light into how B schools actually see each of the factors. So I'll be giving you 5 factors. So you can maybe even take a report card of sorts and say, okay, across these 5 factors on a scale of 1 to 10, where do I rank, right? So I'll be talking about those factors. I will also kind of run you through an application checklist. What are the things that you need to keep in mind? What are the things that will entail in your journey, in the application journey, right? So people think that, I've taken the GMAT and it's all done. Not so. There are a lot of steps that we need to keep in mind. I'll give you a nice, neat checklist so that you can just follow that. And finally, I will also tell you how I can help you, how my team can help you, right? And how we actually extend our application services. So let me get started with the first one, which is, when should I be applying for an MBA MIM program? Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to cut the phase into 4 parts, right? I'm going to cut the journey into 4 parts, and I'm going to give you a rough timeline as to when each of these phases need to be completed. So let's start off with your MBA journey, right? So the first thing that you need to do if you're looking at a top school, you need to take the GMAT, right? So the first step would be to prepare and take the GMAT. At Craftable, we have courses meant for people across a wide spectrum. We have people just starting, we have people who are retakers. So we have not just a LMS platform, but we also have trained teachers who have extensive experience helping students like you. Sometimes that chasm of going from a 650 to a 700, or in some cases a 680 to a 720. In some cases, a 500 to, let's say, a score beyond 650. So we help students in various stages of the prep, but really the first phase in your MBA journey has to be preparing and taking the GMAT. Ideally, you should have taken the GMAT before you apply to the school. So for example, let us say the school has a deadline on October 1st, 12 midnight. You can take the GMAT on October 12th in the afternoon, so that you have a score that you can input, right? So that you don't need to take it X number of days before the application deadline. But obviously, if you have an application deadline, the last thing that you want to worry about is your GMAT score, correct? You don't want to handle the stress of both the GMAT and the application together. So best is to leave around 3 weeks or a month before the application deadline. So for example, if you're applying to a school sometime in September, best for you to take the test by August. If you are applying in the later round, I'll be talking about the rounds as well. But if you're applying to a later round, let's say in January, you probably need to take the test by November, December. So I'll be telling you what are those rounds. Don't worry, it's coming shortly after this. But taking the GMAT is pivotal for your MBA journey, right? So that really is where the thing is going to stop. So my recommendation, take that out of the way as soon as possible. Now, there is a second component that I'm also going to be talking about a little later today, which is you need to create your personal application strategy. Now, what is your personal application strategy? We will be seeing in today's session how to create your application strategy. We're going to have 3 components to this application strategy. We are going to be looking at how to select the B schools. We are also going to be looking at how to showcase your profile. And third, how do I manage the scheduling of the deadlines, right? So these 3 will go into your application strategy that you can maintain at your end. And this is stuff that can happen alongside the GMAT, right? Because a lot of it are questions that you need to ask yourself, research that you need to do, and these are things that you can do very well along with your GMAT prep. So coming to the third, which is the actual application process, right? So when you do apply, you realize that there are going to be multiple components to this application. So if I were to give you a general timeline, if let's say you're applying in October, then you take the GMAT by September end, correct? So you take the GMAT by September end so that by October, you're ready with the GMAT. So the first 2 phases, both should be done before you actually start your application process, okay? And when you start your application process, what you will have is you'll have to go to the B school website, whatever, let's say isb.edu, create your login and start your application. What you'll realize is there is a lot of information that would be required from you. Information about your job, about your education, about a plethora of things that you have done, extracurriculars and so on and so forth. And it sometimes takes time to fill out the application form. So my recommendation is to kind of keep that ready with you while you are still studying for the test, right? So the application form is the basic. You will also be asked some questions which are going to be prompts. So the B school typically will ask you questions about your career. I'll be talking about that in the session a little later. You'll also need to pick a few recommenders. So that's another thing that usually these B schools would require. And apart from that, there are certain procedural things required, such as your transcript and your interview. So once you have kind of submitted your application, you also need to pay an application fee. Post that, you will be shortlisted for an interview, and then you will have the interview process. Once you have done, there is going to be another phase, but this phase will typically be, so let us say that you take the GMAT by September, you apply to a school by October, you get the interview by November. So by December, you will also be getting your admission letter, correct? So this is the letter that says, congratulations, welcome to the class. In case they are giving you any kind of scholarship, this is also the time they will be announcing the scholarship, right? So at this point, you need to probably look at financing. You probably need to look at visa. And if there are any prerequisites required by the school, you would be needing to take those, such as, orientation classes. So many schools, before they start in August, they would require you to join in July, so that there are some courses that you can do in case you do not have a background in those subjects. Now, I was talking about, October deadline and November deadline, the January deadline. So what are these deadlines, right? So most B schools, they will form what is called as a round system, right? So what you have is, you'll have round 1, right? Which is typically around September, October. And the first round is usually advantageous for a reason, which is they have not filled the entire class. The class composition has not been decided, which means that you may be a consultant who they think, brings a certain perspective and they want you in. But the thing is, if you end up not applying in round 1, you can still apply in round 2. Round 2s, earlier it used to start only in January, But now we see round twos starting all the way from November. What is round two? Well, round two is nothing but in case you did not make the earlier deadline, this is a second deadline that is offered by the schools. By no means does it mean that it is going to be impossible to get it, right? But all things being equal, if you do have the advantage of applying in round one, and let us say you get rejected by the schools, round two will give you an option to apply to a new set of colleges. Remember, you cannot apply to the same school in the second round. Because if they have rejected you, let's say a couple of months ago, there is no reason for them to consider your application yet again, right? So that's the reason why they usually don't entertain people applying in the subsequent round. You can apply the next year, but not for the subsequent round. In case you do miss even the bus for round two, there is round three. But to be very honest, round three is usually, to use a sporting analogy, it is the round of death, right? Like they have already made a significant part of the class. They have composed significant part of the class in the first two rounds. You need to be exceptional and you need to be able to stand out from the peer group that you're applying to. Maybe there is something special in your application, but round three is really going to be a round where your chances of admissions would slightly come down from the earlier rounds. But there is another interesting round that I would like you to know about, which is called the early action round. Some schools actually provide you with an option of applying early to the schools, but you need to be, and many of these early action rounds also come with what is called as a binding offer, which means that if you are applying to the school, if they make you an offer, you accept the offer, then you will not be applying to other schools, right? So you need to be very clear. For example, if you were to go ahead and let's say apply to Darden, right, which has an early application round and you cannot get in, you cannot say, oh, let me now apply to Wharton. No, you need to be able to join that school. So you need to be playing this card wisely. Would your application chances go up? Yes, definitely, because from a school perspective, what they are getting is they are getting someone who's committed, someone who's not going to go shopping, right, for other schools after they get admission, because they are also trying to pick the best possible candidates for each entering class, right? So it just makes their life a lot easier, which is why early action rounds are definitely recommended in case you are very clear about specific schools that you have in mind. I'm going to talk now about the first of the three things that will be in your application strategy. So the first thing would be around school selection, right? And as I said, if you are like anyone normal, you would probably go to the website or you talk to people, you hear multiple things, and it is very confusing for us to make the right decision because there is just so much chatter on, what is good. Should I apply abroad? Should I stay in India? IIMs be good. What about IIMs? If I go abroad, then should I go to Europe or should I go to US? Within Europe, should I go to UK? Should I go to non-UK countries? So I'll try to give some structure to this whole decision making. So what I would like you to do is look at it as possibly 4 parameters, and there could be a 5th parameter, 6th parameter, 100th parameter that you may want to add to it. But to a large extent, using a Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, this is basically 80% of all B schools decision making. You will be able to pass through this filter. Okay. One thing that I wanted to say is these filters are not mutually exclusive, right? So you need to apply each of these filters separately. So the first filter would be profile fitment, and I'll be talking about what I mean by this. But you want to be in a B school where you are surrounded by kind of people that you want, right? What is it that you want in the kind of peer group that you're going to be surrounded by? The second factor is what is it that you're ultimately doing an MBA for, right? It is to advance your career. Is this the right school to help me get to my goals? Is a very important question that you need to be asking. The third parameter would be the geography, right? It's a big decision whether you want to be in India or whether you should apply to, schools abroad. If I apply to schools abroad, is there any advantage of one country over the other? So that is a huge decision, huge parameter that usually will come in your decision making. And finally, what are your chances of admission, correct? I may like the profile of Harvard. Harvard may also give me the right career prospects. Maybe I want to settle in the US. So Harvard fits all the three, kind of parameters. But if I have a 650 on the GMAT, very average profile, my chances of admissions are next to zero. So why should I, waste my money, time applying to a school like Harvard, right? So that's pretty much the fourth factor that you would need to consider. In terms of the first one, which is profile fitment, I think one part of the exercise that I would like you to do, and this comes in your application strategy. I hope you have a paper and a pen and you've written, your personal application strategy. So the first thing that I would like you to do is go and look up the class distribution of, the school that you're applying to, correct? What is the average age? What is the kind of work experience they have? You can also get a sense of the kind of culture that you will have in a particular school, right? For example, INSEAD is a school where, it's going to be 10 months, people come typically from a consulting background, and guess where they go to after MBA from INSEAD? Well, they go back to consulting, correct? So, you have a particular way in which that works. Whether you are okay to go to a school where there are going to be more Indians, or you may want to say, well, I want to go to a school where I want, let's say, a particular type of international diversity, right? So let me give you an example. There is a school in Switzerland known as IMD, right? It's in this lovely place called Lausanne. And IMD has a batch size of 90. And usually every year, you'll have 50 different geographies. Correct? You can imagine the kind of diversity that you're going to have in that classroom. Now, let us compare that with ISB. Great school, also a one-year program, but let's be honest. First of all, you're going to have, some amount of exposure. There are, study abroad options available. There are going to be some expats in your class, but let's be honest, it's Indian school of business, right? So you're not going to get that level of diversity. So those are the kind of things that you need to ask yourself. Let me give an example of IIM Ahmedabad, right? So IIM Ahmedabad runs the PGPX program. If you look at the average age, it is about 30, 31, right? It is not odd for people, to be 35, 36 in that program. In fact, one of our students got into the PGPX program a couple of years ago. He was 42 when he got into the program, right? So you will not see that in, let's say, some other schools, right? So you also need to see what are the kind of profiles. And the best way for you to do that is obviously spend time on the school's website. I think there is a lot of information that is available today. If you talk to people in the admission committee, you would be able to get some amount of this information. The second, thing that you would probably want to consider is this school going to help me get to where I want to go, right? So what you need to do is you need to get at least an idea of what are the kind of companies that you want to work for, right? What are the kind of titles that you probably will be offered, right? And obviously, you need to know what industry I'm going to work in and what kind of function I'm going to be part of. So let me give you an example. Let us say that you are from the technology background, you worked in technology coding, and you want to do an MBA, and you feel that you bring the technical chops with your management, education, and you want to become a product manager. Now, the idea is to say, what kind of companies do you want to work for? Are these early stage startups? Do you want to be part of the founding team? Maybe you want to find your co-founders in the B school itself, or you want to kind of come out, work for a large company for a few years, and then transition onto entrepreneurship. Whatever the choice be, LinkedIn is an excellent way for you to reach out to people. So I would definitely suggest that all of you spruce up your profile on LinkedIn. I noticed that many of you are not active on LinkedIn. Maybe you're just, kind of ghost over there, just going, checking things, but not actively participating. But I would definitely recommend that you put a recent picture, update your profile. By the way, my name is Arun Jagannathan. You can look me up on LinkedIn. You can please connect with me. I also share stuff about GMAT and MBA admissions, but also when you connect with me, you get access to all the people in my network. I think, they become like a second degree connection to you. So please do connect with people who are in the B school. Maybe you was a college senior and he went on to do an MBA from the school that you're looking at. Best for us to connect, talk to current students, talk to people who are studying in the B school or maybe recent graduates, because they will be able to tell you a lot of insights as to how things happen on campus. So at Crack Global, we are fortunate that, over the years, we have been able to send students to, almost all the top schools. So we stay in touch with them and we kind of build a kind of an intelligence, right, of what is really happening in the campus. And, we also share this information to students, through other ways, but just wanted you to kind of keep that as part of your research. The third is, a question that you really need to ask yourself, which is what geography you want to pick. Are you happy being in India? I think the biggest question, the bifurcation over here is going to be India or abroad, correct? And really, there is no right or wrong answer to it. I think being in India is a safer option. Definitely, it's a safer option. But the opportunities are also going to be in India. So if you feel that India is the next destination, it's going to be the next kind of superpower, and you want to be part of that growth, great. You can choose an Indian B school, be it ISB or IIMs or any of these. Or if you say, well, I want to go to US because US is not just the largest economy in the world, but it also has some of the best universities, right? From the Harvards and the Stanfords and the Whartons of the world to even if you look at a school ranked 20, 30, according to most rankings, these are very, very good schools. So even a school ranked 20th in many of these rankings, very good school, I would say, would be a top school in India, right? So US is always an option. One big issue that happened in the last few years was the presidency. There were a lot of issues, but now with Joe Biden coming in, things have changed a lot more receptive. Companies are also, encouraged to hire MBAs. So the visa part is definitely easing out. Even the options to remove OPT are now gone. So which means you actually can apply for an MBA program with what is called as a STEM accreditation. So STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. So along with your MBA programs, you can add like a data analytics course or a BI course. And there are ways by which you can make your MBA into STEM. In fact, many MBAs are offering a STEM MBA, which gives you, after your MBA, a potential for working for 3 years, which is 1 year and then a 2-year extension. So roughly around 36 months is that you can work. And hoping that during this period, you are also getting an employer who can file your H-1B visa, right? I will not get into the details of how the visa works, but that is really how things work in the US. If I were to now look at Canada, which has also come up as a place that many people are applying, and have students come and say, Arun, difference between Canada and US. Well, for starters, the Canadian economy is a lot smaller than the US economy, right? So you'll have schools around Toronto, because a large part of Canada is, too cold, French speaking. So, you are restricted to some parts of Canada. So don't look up in the map and say, oh, Canada is so big, it's a large country. It's actually, population is a lot lower. And the advantage definitely is while you are doing this, you apply for a PR and, you cannot get it. So we have had students who have gone to Schulich, Rotman, So almost every year we have students applying to Canadian schools along with US schools. And if they get into a Canadian school, sometimes they make an option to even pick that because it's just a lot easier for them to get a permanent residency. Again, the scope of today's webinar won't allow me to get into too much of details of what these visa regulations are. So I will just try to give you a synopsis so that you understand enough so that you can do the research by yourself. Now, coming to Europe, I would like to specify that there is a difference between UK and continental Europe. UK, which is not part of the EU now, so the whole Brexit thing. A couple of reasons why I'm saying this. So the first reason why I think UK gives you a better option is it is English speaking, right? So language is going to be a huge problem if you're going to go to study in Germany or Spain or France or any other place. So UK, at least the language is in control. They drive on the left-hand side of the road. They watch cricket, right? So a lot of advantages. But then, I would say the second big advantage that you have, and this is something that has come up in the last few years, has been the 2-year work permit that you get after your MBA, correct? So you actually get to stay for 2 years, which means 1 year of your MBA and then 2 years, at least 3 years, you're going to be in the UK and, pretty sure you'd be able to figure out something to, kind of get a job and process it that way. If you're not interested in North America, you're not interested in Europe, I'm assuming that Africa and South America are places you don't want to apply. Neither are there any schools in Russia and Middle East. And just, so let's look at Asia Pacific, right? So Asia Pacific, if you're looking at it, I would say, do look at schools in Southeast Asia. I think Singapore has come as a huge hub. NUS, NTU are some of the top schools in Singapore that you should definitely consider. But apart from that, there are schools in China, CBIZ, there is AIM Manila, there is, a lot of schools that you can consider, even in Australia, right? So Australia, according to me, sometimes is underrated, but I think there are some good schools, Melbourne Business School, AGSM in Sydney. So Melbourne and Sydney are the, pretty much places that you have these two schools. Apart from that, yes, obviously you have India, and as I said, ISB, IIM, SPJ, XLRI. There is nothing like a good school or a bad school. As I said in point number 2, if this is a school that is going to help you get to, if I want to be a business analyst working in a company in the US and going to a, let's say, Emory, correct, is the right choice for me. Emory is the best school for you, especially if Emory gives you a scholarship, correct? So I would say don't get fixated with rankings, but rather try to also see whether I want to be in that country. What are the long-term prospects? Try to understand if there is a visa point system that is required in that country. And also when you look at the United States, I would also like to look at specific cities. For example, if you are in technology, you would want to be in the West Coast, or if you're in finance, you want to be in the East Coast. Obviously, these are very generic thumb rules, but also try to see if you can be in a larger city, so it is easier for you to get access to employment opportunities. So there are certain things that you would want to consider even when you're looking within specific geography, right? But yes, geography would be a big factor. But I would say the fourth and the final factor and the most important factor in some sense would be your GMAT score. So my thumb rule, again, remember this is a thumb rule, but if you are, in the school's average, try to get 30 points higher than average, because average is a misleading number, correct? Because there are going to be a lot of people in the class who will have very different profiles, and because of that, they can afford a lower GMAT score, right? Typically, people who have diversity factors working for them. And I'll talk about it in the next section, but I will tell you what are the things that people would consider when they are looking at your profile. So there are a bunch of things that they will consider, but if I were to say all things being equal, right? If a school has, let's say, an average GMAT of 650, you probably need to apply with a 680 plus, right? Now, if you have noticed, many top schools their average GMAT score is, in the range of 710, 720, and so on. So if you are looking at the very top schools in the world, then, definitely you should be looking at gunning for as high a GMAT score as possible, right? Definitely, 740, 750, 760 would put you in league with, let's say, the applicant pool for a top school. But there are great schools that are available even in the 650, 700 range. So don't despair, but I'm just saying use that. And you could probably have a mix of schools that could be safe schools, reach schools, and threat schools. And, you want to maybe play around with a mix. Depends on your risk appetite to a large extent. Sometimes I have students who say, Arun, I want to apply only to safe schools. Sometimes I have students who come and tell me, Arun, I do not want to have a regret in life. I did not apply to a higher ranked school. So sometimes I advise them that, applying to a top school, knowing that you may get rejected, could perhaps be seen as an insurance policy against regret. Right? The last thing you want is, hey, maybe I could have applied to that school and I could have gotten it. So please go ahead and apply. But then it would be foolish if all your schools are dream schools, all of them are stress schools, and you're really not helping your probability of admission that particular year. Right? So I think the first part of the application strategy you have in place. So what is the next step for you? The next step for you would be to create a simple Google spreadsheet. Go to the website of the schools, try to see if you can get some information about the school, try to go to LinkedIn, see if there are people who are alums of that school, if there is a common connect, try to see how much of information you can get about that school now, so that by the time you're applying, you are ready with all the relevant information, right? Okay. So I see that Shikla is taking the questions on the chat window. So I'm going to be looking at the next portion, which is what do B schools look for in an applicant, right? Like, how do I make sure that my application is successful? How do I make sure that, the B school is able to, the way I look at it is, think of the B school admission committee as a venture capitalist, right? Like a VC. And you are the startup that they want to invest in. Because think about it, every year they have only 900 seats or 200 seats or 500, whatever the number of seats be, that's the total number of seats they have. They cannot expand that capacity. They cannot say, oh, this year we have more people or fewer people I can afford. So what they are looking at is, how will this person be useful to us? Right? I mean, this is a capitalistic world, right? So even a B school is going to ask, what is it that they want from a student? Just think about it. They want successful alumni, right? They want successful alumni who will not just increase or boost the reputation of the school. If you take ISB, right? I know 2004, 2005, there are so many students who have come to me and said, Arun, I heard about this new school that has started in Gachibowli. Is this a good school? They are asking for, that time it was, I think, 10 or 12 lakhs. They are asking for 12 lakhs, is there a good program? But now ISB has been able to establish itself as a top school, not because it goes and says we are a top school. It is because the alums are now today starting companies, they are venture capitalists, they are working in all the industries. So how does a B school do that? So what the B school has decided is, let me try to look at certain things that will give me some idea how this person will perform in the future. What they are looking at is something in you today which is going to tell me how you will perform 5 to 10 years into the future, right? Think about it. That's the problem statement really that a B school has. So what they have done is they have picked 5 parameters. And again, I'm just trying to make it very simple, but, think of it as a report card they have, and they are saying, okay, I'm going to be evaluating this person across these 5 parameters. And, I want someone who's able to kind of, tick all the right checkboxes. And we'll get into it a little bit more in detail. But what happens is, many times, students do not understand. For example, goal clarity is often misunderstood as saying that, oh, I want to be a consultant, correct? I want to be a consultant, I want to work in McKinsey, right? And, you cannot be stating such things, in a simplistic way, right? You need to make a case for yourself. Remember, this is a VC, right? He's investing in you, right? So he's just as a startup has to show, what is the future, why they are going to be big. You need to convince the B school that you are the best person for them to bet, right, for the next 5 or 10 years. Why should they bet in you, correct? You also are going to be seen in terms of, your academic potential, your work experience, what kind of leadership diversity qualities that you bring in, and what's your overall personality, right? How do they do this? Let's get a little bit into detail. So what I'm going to give you is are these 6 questions, right? And I want you to take out, the next 5-10 minutes. I'm going to be talking about this to really pay attention and try to answer. If I were to answer this question today, because in your application strategy, these are the 6 core questions that you need to be answering. If you're able to answer these 6 core questions honestly to yourself, you should be able to answer it to any B school in the world, correct? First, you need to be able to convince yourself. The first thing is, where do you want to go? What is your career plan, right? This is not just, 3 years later, where are you 5 years later? This is your career plan. There is something that you have discovered, okay, in your life, whatever age you are at, 25 or 28, that, hey, this is what I want to do in life, right? You need to start with the why. What is the reason for your existence? Why were you put on planet Earth? What is that big vision that you have? And for you to execute that big vision, how would you break it into shorter term goals? Yes, I want to save the world, but the next 2 years, I hope to work for an NGO or work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I need to see a concrete career plan, a career path that you are able to convince yourself. Whether you actually tread that career path, it's anybody's guess, right? You can go and say, oh, I got into an MBA, I realized there was an opportunity that I wasn't aware of. Perfectly okay. No B school in the world is going to come and ask you at the time of placement, why did you write that in your essay? You said consulting, why are you sitting for venture capital? No B school will do that, right? People understand your plans are going to change. But at the time of application, you need to be confident in showing, right? What is that? Can you pivot in your career? Sure. But at this point, you need to have the conviction of that career plan. Now, the second is, why is that the goal? Why are you the best person to get there? Can you tell me something in your education, something in your experience, something in your extracurriculars? Can I see a spike? Can I see something that, something tells me that this guy will be successful in that role? Correct? For example, as I said, the earlier example I gave is a product manager, right? If you want to be a product manager, why should I trust that you will be a great product manager? Correct? So you can expect questions in the interview to be of the nature, tell me a product that you absolutely like. Tell me 3 reasons why you love it. Tell me a product that you think you hate. Tell me 3 reasons what they should do to make it better. So you will see that they really want to drill a lot deeper into whether you bring, you have a certain intent behind pursuing it. And if you have the intent, the third point, which is why are you the best person to reach to that goal, correct? This is where you need to talk about the transferable skills that you bring to the table, correct? How would you contribute to the class, correct? What makes you unique? This claim of being a software engineer who wants to be a product manager, there are 100 other people telling the story. But there is something that makes you different from them. That's the value that you bring to the table. Now, the value could be that I work for an early stage startup. The value could be, I'm following someone. You could, look at it in multiple ways. Most important, the fourth question. Why do you really want to do an MBA? So this is my goal. This is where I am. What is the delta? what is the delta that I'm trying to bridge, right? Many a times, the reasons that people pick are, I just think an MBA is good for me. It is going to give me more money, or, I'm going to be so high up in the org structure, right? I'll just jump like a couple of, to be very honest, there are three things that any MBA can give you. Three things. First, it will give you a wide cross-functional knowledge of how any business works, right? So they'll give you a little bit of accounts, they'll give you a little bit of stats, they'll give you marketing, they'll give you sales, they'll give you organization behavior, all of it distilled for you in a course, right? The second thing that a B school gives you is by surrounding you by people who have a particular perspective, right? Because they come from different industries, different functions, and many B schools they have what is called as a cohort-based system. They want to put you into a team, and they essentially will let you work as a team, because in the real world, that is exactly what is going to happen. All the knowledge that you learn has to be applied in a cross-cultural, cross-functional setup, right? And that's really what you need to be getting from a B school. And the third thing is obviously the brand, the network, the equity that you get because you have been to a particular school, the access that it gives you, right? The doors that it can unlock because you're an alum from from a particular school. So broadly, these are the three things that you can hope to get from an MBA, and this is where you need to tie it with where you are and where you want to head to. Question number 5, why our school? Every reason that you have given so far is you and your goals and this, but what makes us the choice that you want to pick, right? So you need to be doing your research, and if you have done the first part well, you just connected people on LinkedIn, gone to the B School website, attended the info sessions, spoken to people in the admission committee, you should have rock solid points for the fifth one. Last question, and specifically in the post-pandemic world, one thing that a B School is asking is, why is now the best time for you? Why not last year? Why not next year? Why is now the best time? And I think it gives you an opportunity to reflect on how your industry has changed and how you see this industry changing, and kind of tie it back to point number 1, and therefore how you like to be playing a larger part in where your industry is moving, correct? So that's the kind of clarity that's going to be expected. When we work with clients, we spend usually the first week or so just doing, just trying to understand a little bit more, giving students, applicants some time to reflect on their own journey and where they are headed. So the B School gets to know your goal clarity. Second thing they want to know is, will this person be able to survive in the demanding, rigorous program that they have created for you, right? So to a large extent, your undergraduate institute, your GPA, your if you have any patents, if you have any advanced degrees, these are all signals, correct? It is not going to be a make or break. Sometimes I've had students come and ask me that, do I need to go to a top school in order to apply to a school? No, definitely not, right? They are looking at people from various backgrounds, but you need to have demonstrated an ability to handle coursework. The last thing that they want is you join the B School, you cannot cope up with the rigors of the B School, and you end up dropping out, right? So they don't want that. And of all the things, and many of you are cringing, thinking, Arun, when I was a student, I didn't know better, my grades suck, what do I do? Well, there is nothing that you can do to change your path. The one thing that you have in control is your GMAT scores, right? So please try to get as high a GMAT score as possible, so that the B School is convinced that, well, that was a matter of the past. The person definitely has the faculty to grasp what is going to be taught in the MBA program. The third thing is, work experience. And one thing that I think most people get confused and misunderstand work experience is this number of years. I have 3 years experience, I have 5 years experience, I have 7 years experience. Is that a good thing, bad thing? To be honest, quantity is not of any relevance today. right? If you look at it in a top school, you will have people with 2 years experience. You may have people with even, 10, 12, 15 years experience. What matters is what has been your career progression? How have you progressed in your career, right? How has been your performance? Pedigree of the employer will also matter because they know that it's hard to get into, let's say, a Google. So if you have worked for a Google, then there is going to be added credential that you get. But it is not always that a bigger company is better. In fact, in our experience, we have had students applying from smaller companies, but what they were able to showcase is they were able to showcase their leadership skills, how they were able to seize roles and responsibilities, how they were able to punch above their weight class, how they were able to take experience. For example, we have had candidates who spoke about how they actually were responsible for hiring, correct? So they said, apart from the technical skills, I understood what it means to check for attitude. With 2 years experience, I am understanding, what are the behavioral questions that I should be asking. So you need to be able to showcase your work experience in terms of quality, not in terms of quantity, correct? In fact, I would argue that if you spend more years doing the same thing, it probably works against you. The fourth is what I would broadly categorize as your X factor. I'm going to use the word X factor. And the X factor is what else apart from the numbers. Numbers I have understood, correct? Your GMAT, your GPA, your undergrad, your employer, your roles and responsibilities, and all of that I've got. But tell me something that is unique, something that is different, something that makes you you, right? Something that makes you tick. It could be at work. It could be things that you've volunteered at work, initiatives that you've taken, driven projects independently, brought about innovation, how you manage a tough time with the team, how you perhaps mentored new recruits, or it could be outside of work where I just wanted to point out sometimes, students come and say, Arun, I've been donating for a cause. Is that considered volunteer work? No, they are looking at whether you were a person who actually created impact, correct? So instead of, using money or saying that, oh, I went for this sapling plantation drive that my company has organized, they are saying, for example, there is a particular NGO or a particular cause that you like. Is there a way by which you can volunteered your time? In fact, COVID pandemic came upon us, and the second wave was brutal in India. What did you do at that time? Were you sitting at home chilling, watching Netflix, correct? Or were you, doing something? So those are the kind of stories that they want to hear. There is going to be a lot of emphasis on what kind of background this person comes. So sometimes you could also talk about things like a particular hobby that you have, something that you have pursued. Let's say you play the guitar and every weekend you're jamming with your band. That is an X factor that you have. Now, if you are doing that, we are not expecting that you are also doing something for an NGO, correct? Because nobody is really wanting any NGO experience. I think that's a misnomer. They just want you to do something constructive with your time, right? And that doesn't really mean that you need to do an NGO. You could be playing a guitar and you could say like, I have a rock band, and during the pandemic, in order to liven the mood, we used to have these, jamming session on Zoom, and I would call my friends from, to join it, and just kind of, maybe that's something that you want to talk about. But I hope you are getting a drift of what I'm trying to say. One thing that I would like you to keep in mind is please do not fake this, right? Be yourself. Don't try to impress by being someone you're not. I'm pretty sure if you dig deep, there will be things that you would have done, things that can be showcased in the right way to a B school. The last parameter that I'm going to pick over here is your overall personality, right? So the B school also is going to give you an essay. Many of the schools now also have a video essay They are looking at how clear you are in communicating. You would have your recommenders talk about, your strengths and weaknesses. There is also an interview process. Almost all interview process today are conducted over Zoom. How do I convey my personality over Zoom is a question that you need to start pondering, but definitely they will look at because all of what you have given, your application, your CV, everything else is just paper, right? You could be a paper tiger, but they don't really know whether, you are a person who is capable of executing. So there are ways and means by which they will be judging you on this. Now, coming to the last part of what I had in terms of, what it takes to put in a successful application would be, I'm just going to give you a very broad checklist. This is by no means the only checklist. You could have a couple of other things, but I'm just giving a sense of what are the things you need to keep in mind. So you have a valid GMAT score. So that is number one. The second is your TOEFL or your IELTS course. This is optional. Many US schools may not require if you have your education in English. However, there are some schools, like for example, MIT requires a TOEFL score, correct? So it's always good for you to check if the school that you're applying to requires this. If so, along with your GMAT, you probably also want to take such tests. You're also expected to create a one-page business CV. As I mentioned earlier, you'll have a lot of details in the application form. You may have an optional video essay, but compulsory, you'll have a set of essays that you need to be answering. And each school will have its own formats, its own prompts, its own word limits. So some schools may give you more words, some people may give you fewer. You would also be required to pick a couple of recommenders, your undergrad transcripts. Sometimes they may even check your LinkedIn profile. So always best during the application process to have your updated LinkedIn profile so that you're also reaching out to people in the admission committee in the school, students, alumni, using a fresh profile. Remember, there is going to be $100, $150 application fee. So you also keep that in mind. And lastly, if you're shortlisted, you would be called for an interview. So I'll just kind of breeze through some of these points. Just a quick time check. It's about 8:55 right now. I will be going on till about 9:10. And after that, I'll be taking any questions you have. So the last 10, 15 minutes, I just wanted to pick individual components. So the application essays, you really need to write a very compelling story, as I mentioned, in very strict timelines, right? So word limits, right? So they are going to be asking you a career goals essay. They are going to ask some kind of a uniqueness essay. They may ask some, other, So what is one advice that I have to offer is assume that the application reader does not come from your industry, your domain, correct? So how do I tell a story, right? That's really, if you ask me, the crux of the essays is your ability to tell a story. It is not to bore them with details, it's not to tell how great you are, but it is to tell how insightful you are. What did you learn from that experience? How did this make you a better person? And thereby, how does that make you a better candidate applying to the school this year, right? As I mentioned, we do have a YouTube channel. So my recommendation is to go to the YouTube channel every year. I put up a detailed admission guide to the top 30, 50 schools in the world. We should be doing so again this year. So watch out for those, but you can always go back. A lot of content on our YouTube channel that you can check out. Now, coming to the recommendation letters, typically too, you cannot take it from an academic supervisor if you have been working. If you're working, best to get one from your manager, and you could get others from a peer, could be a client, could be other people who could give a better sense of who you are as a person. Now, one thing that I've had students ask me is, Aru, can I go to my earlier boss? 2 years ago, I used to work, because if I go to my current boss, it will somehow jeopardize my career prospects within my current company. This is a problem that, if you think about it, everyone who's applying to Harvard this year is probably facing the same problem, correct? So I think it is best to get your manager in confidence, have a very honest conversation with him and say, hey, this is what I'm looking at, and kind of really prep him, because the manager who managed you 2 years ago is going to give a recommendation based on who you were 2 years ago, right? Whereas you want a more up-to-date version of that, right? So you want someone who's currently working. You cannot be taking it from friends and family. You cannot. So I know sometimes people say, oh, I know this guy, he's a big shot. I haven't worked with him, but he's willing to give me a recommendation. Well, big no-no, because you're not trying to pull strings, right? You're not trying to tell the B school, how great I am. One question that sometimes, students, applicants also have is, should I go for someone who's very high up in the hierarchy, or should I get someone who knows me very well? My take would be, ideally, you want someone who knows you very well, because what is going to happen is a couple of things. A, these schools are going to ask you to write essays that tell a story about you. And someone who knows you well will be able to add that extra dimension, extra flavor, extra perspective to your entire application. Whereas if you go for someone very high up the rank, typically he's going to say, right, whatever you want, I'll just sign it. Or he's not invested in you, right? So if you are going to be applying to 5 schools, you don't want to go back to him, every other day and say, I have a new school application. So pick someone that you're comfortable working with. And if that person happens to be an alum of the school that you're applying to, definitely it's going to be a plus point for you. It's not like there is anything guaranteed, but definitely, because your recommender has been to that school, the recommender understands what it takes to succeed. And remember what I told you, the recommender is also invested, because if you're going to join the B school's reputation is what eventually, if you look at it for any alum, after a few years, they are not going to remember what they learned in B school, right? What really matters is the brand credentials and the network. So if your recommender is an alum, they would definitely, it would add a certain weight to it, right? Again, recommendation letters is a vast topic, but I just wanted to make sure that I touch upon the important ones. Why do they conduct an interview? Because whatever you've written so far is on the paper. They actually want to now hear you say this, right? They want to see if you are able to think through. If they kind of pose counter questions to you, what are your, kind of thoughts on that? So they really want to know you as a person. Like if this person were to come on campus, how would he gel with everyone else? What is the personality that he brings to? Many of these are applicant initiated, which means along with your application process, you'll also be given an option of selecting your interview date, right? So it is kind of built into the system. In some cases, it may be by invite, which means once you send in your application, you have to wait for them to invite you for an interview. And the interview itself could be an AdCom interview, or it could be an alumni interview, right? So an AdCom interview is people who are still in the university, who are part of the admission committee, who are interviewing you. They have the whole application docket in front of them. Whereas if it's an alumni interview, typically they just have your CV, right? They just have that and they kind of go through it. In terms of the formats available, there is 2 formats. So it could be in person if the world goes towards more vaccination and you feel comfortable meeting your interviewer and you have an interviewer in your city, or what has been the norm in 2020, 2021 so far has been Zoom interviews. So these are the 2 formats. Typically, telephone interviews and all that are out, right? So nobody interviews in telephone. It's at least face-to-face. I was mentioning about a 1-page business resume. So this is something that we also help applicants who work with us, which is, don't put technical details. You want to show how you were able to create an impact. There are some tips on how to write. Putting tangible numbers is very important. Creating a structure, which is, what is the situation? What did you do? What is the result? Trying to put that in a, single line using a verb form. These are all things that you should keep in mind. This sometimes takes a few days, so please make sure that you start thinking about it. And at this point, you may not really worry about financing, but just giving you some options. So there are a lot of institutes which offer non-collateral loans, which is the usual norm these days. Most students don't want to depend on their parents, or they may not have that much earning to really pay for a MBA, given that it's significantly expensive. So there are a lot of fintech companies, right? So they will look at your profile, they look at the kind of schools that you're applying to, and based on that, they will arrive at an interest rate. And usually they will fund about 60 to 70% of your total expense. So you still need to be taking some part of it. So it's not that you will get 100. Some cases you will also get that, but you need to be taking it on a case-to-case basis. Sometimes they also have a co-signer, so in case you know someone, because foreign banks compared to Indian banks will always give you a lower interest rate, right? So your interest rates are going to be more competitive. It comes to India, be it non-collateral or collateral, there will be a cap, there will be certain things that you need to keep in mind. So between non-collateral and collateral, there is one distinction. Between foreign banks and Indian banks also, there is a distinction. Some students try to see if they can finance their MBA to the maximum possible extent. Their rationale is, why should I pick interest at, let's say, 11% when I do not know if my money is going to make more than 11%, right? So that is the logic they sometimes have. You could also look at soft loans from what is called as friends, families, and father-in-law, or friends, family, and fools, right? Depending on how you look at it. But really, these are people who are invested in you. Could be your rich uncle who is willing to bankroll your first year. But these are options that you have. And the last thing is scholarships. So myth again is that getting an admission is hard. How will I go for a scholarship? Not true. Routinely, many of our students get huge scholarships. In fact, this year alone, we had Shashank who got into Wharton, and he had sizable scholarship. In fact, we had Savit Sharma, and all of these are videos that we have put up on YouTube, so you can always go and refer those. But Savit got almost 100,000 US dollars. You can imagine that his MBA became a lot affordable, right? So he got into UCLA Anderson, correct? So scholarships do make a huge difference in your entire approach to financing, right? So while you are applying, you don't need to do anything differently, but while you are applying, you want to perhaps consider, also writing the scholarship essays. Just wanted to kind of wrap up today's session that I hope you are able to get value from whatever I told you. I hope the session was useful. I've had students come and say, Arun, you seem to know this, your team seems to know this because we've been doing it for so many years. How is it that you can help us? Well, what we have is, apart from me, and Shrikala was also there in the webinar today, we also have a bunch of other mentors. These are all experienced mentors, people who have gone to top schools. And the way we work is, we work with the candidate, first building the story. So first building, those important questions. What is your career plan? What is your pitch? What are the, ways in which you're going to kind of, weave that together? Post that, the second phase is where we detail on the actual schools. So now that we know the actual schools, what is the specific information that we need to know about that school? How do I approach my essays? What in my story will fit perfectly into a particular school? So sometimes a story may fit into a particular application, but the same story may not have a space in some other application. So somewhere you need to figure out what is the narrative. How do I express this story in words? For many of you, writing may not come very naturally, and maybe your education and experience has not prepared you for it. But really, if you want to get into a B school, one skill that you need to develop will be your ability to write in a very cogent manner, something that is able to express your thoughts very clearly, succinctly in the words that are provided. Now, as you can guess, many of them, they work in top companies, right? I'm just giving you a sense of the kind of, so let me give some examples over here. Sherin Kurian, who is an MBA from Duke, works for Apple, and she actually predicts the sales of iPhone around the world, right? She's actually part of that team. Now, when you get someone who's working, in such a role, they bring enormous perspective, the way they write, the way they look at thoughts, and it makes a huge difference. So we do not write your essays. I want to be very clear, right? We are not the agency where we'll just type out some essays. We would expect you to write, and what we are really doing is training you on the skills of writing, because not just in the application essay, but even in B school and life beyond. If you're going to join an Amazon, for example, these are skills that will, you need to keep in mind. It'll stand you in good stead for the rest of your career, right? So that's one of the things. And all of this comes together. We also have a team internal in Crack Verbal, and these internal people will help you, with school research, helping you with, other pieces. If we are able to connect you with an alum, we do that. So we do a bunch of things to kind of help you. So it's our intention is based on the outcome. Yes, we may have technicalities as to how many rounds and how we do it, but as a company, our goal is how do I get you into a school of your choice, right? So we'll do whatever it takes to help you make the right decisions. With that, I just wanted to also let you know that apart from MBA applications, we also have a GMAT product. So we have both an on-demand program. We also have a live session. In fact, I take some of the live sessions over the weekend. So in case you enjoyed today's session, you enjoyed hearing me, you probably will like those sessions as well. Some of you attending the session could also be my students, in which case I'll probably be seeing you on the weekend. But these are some of the products that we have. Just wanted to kind of touch base on that. And Shikla is also providing you with a 24-hour access to the entire Crack Verbal course. So in case you want to kind of check it out, please do let us know. Happy to get started with your GMAT prep journey. All right, so I just wanted to check with you if you have any questions. I think most of the questions are already answered, but I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. But with that, I just wanted to also conclude today's session for those who have joined in. But I'm going to be staying back, and if you have any specific questions, I would love to answer those for you. So let me just look on the chat window that I have over here. Or else, if you're all good, you can also let me know. Maybe give me a thumbs up or say yes. And I hope I was able to add value. I hope I was able to live up to my promise, which is to add value and make sure that this 60 minutes that you spent was the most productive for the whole week. Okay, so here is what I'm going to talk about in terms of the story. Whatever your post-MBA goal, wherever you are, what you need to remember is you need to be able to tell a convincing story that is connecting point A to point B, correct? If you are able to tell the story, so I'll give an example of a student he graduated from IIT Kharagpur. He worked in Schlumberger, is that the name, right? The French company, for about 3 years. In fact, he was posted in Siberia. He was posted in East Africa. Very interesting experiences over there. Obscenely high GMAT score. He applied to Stanford. And his pitch to Stanford was very simple. He said, look, I've got IIT Kharagpur engineering. I've got Schlumberger experience, 3 years. I will get a Stanford MBA. If I have these three components, I'm very sure that ExxonMobil, British Petroleum, Shell, or any of these large energy companies, when they come to campus, I become the ideal candidate for them. Most of these companies also have a 2-year cross-functional leadership program, and I want to be applying to that program in those companies. Which means 2 years after I work, I will be put in one of their offices anywhere in the world in a fairly senior position. But after about 5 years of doing that, I want to start my own consulting, because with my IIT degree, with my Stanford MBA, with my experience in Schlumberger and ExxonMobil, I have the right credentials to start my own consulting. However, the larger problem that I'm trying to address is the energy crisis that India is going to face. So eventually, I also want to enter the domain of public policy, and I want to ensure that energy, which is so the way you weave this whole story, correct? So you have a larger goal, but somehow you are kind of making all of them fit together, is what a B school is looking at. Now, I just gave you one example, but whatever your background, whatever your future goal, your story has to be convincing, correct? And just a point over there, which is many a time, we have students who end up in a scenario where they kind of say certain things. For example, this particular candidate, just to let you know, after his MBA from Stanford, he joined BCG. He joined a management consulting firm. He didn't join ExxonMobil, right? So just wanted to let you know that it's just your ability to tell this, you can always. There is a question we have, which is given more importance, work diversity or academic diversity? How many years of work experience should one have to apply to B schools abroad? I think I have taken this. First of all, do not get into this trap of believing that the 5 parameters I gave you, it is like 20%, 20%, 20%. Each school has its own mix of how much academic diversity, how much experience. They have their own magic sauce. So try to see how you are able to convince the school on those 5 parameters. Don't worry too much on the individual weightage given to the parameters. Point number 1. Point number 2, as I mentioned, how many years of experience? Ideally, what is seen is an average class size. The experience is usually about 3 to 5 years. But remember, average is a number. I'll give you 2 examples, both crackable students. First one, Raviraj Jain, many years ago, he was one of our initial students, got a 750 on the GMAT, IIT Bombay, got into Harvard Business School. He had just 2 years experience. He applied with just about a year's experience, right? So he had just 2 years experience when he applied. So, one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum would be, let's say, someone like Neeraj Kakkar, who is the founder of Paperboard, was a crackable student at some point in the past, and he scored a 770 on the GMAT. He was 31 when he applied to a B school, right? I'm just giving you a context of how vast the difference could be. He got into water, right? So, just try to remember that it's about quality. It's not so much about quantity. Samiksha has this question, which is, I think Samiksha, I have kind of answered this question. How do I put this in my essay or convince the interviewers? This is going to be the biggest thing, right? Like if you are going to compete with a chartered accountant, right? You have no finance experience, you are a techie, and suddenly you're competing with someone who took commerce in school, who did BCom, who did 3 years of articleship, who knows accounts so well. It's going to be hard for you to make a case. But if you were to say, hey, by the way, I have taken the CFA and I am level 2, would that add? Definitely it would add to your story. So I need to see some evidence in your past which tells me that you bring some transferable skills to the table. That's the crux of it. Deferred MBA deadline for 2021 graduated, Sarthak, I'm not sure I got it. MBA in US versus Canada, I have already mentioned this. This video would be on the same URL, so you can actually go back. I did mention anything that you have, you can always get in touch with anyone at Crackable. We are glad to have a conversation with you. Look at what are your prospects, where are you, what could possibly be done. So we are glad to help you on that. My undergrad, so I have a question from, I'm just taking the next question, which is, my undergrad research paper is going to get published. Will that be considered? Yes, definitely it will be considered. MIM from Germany versus Paris versus UK. MIM in Europe, great option. Again, UK will give you an edge over others for the 2 reasons I mentioned: language and culture, work permit post your MBA. Is there any major disadvantage of taking the GRE instead of the GMAT? To be very honest, not a major disadvantage, but even today, 90% of people are applying with the GMAT score. And GMAT has been the, like the norm for so many years. So it's just more easier to interpret a 3-digit GMAT score as opposed to a GRE score, right? Especially for these schools. Having said that, please, if you are looking at, let's say, a master's and you want to do an MBA and you think doing GRE is easier, please take the GRE and there is no problem. But if there is no option, pick GMAT. My undergrad degree is in advertising and media. Is that the kind of diversity these schools are looking for? See, diversity comes in many hues and colors. Your undergrad being a different stream could be a diversity. If you are a female candidate, if you are a woman applying to an MBA, that itself becomes a diversity factor for you, right? If you come from a rural background, that could be a diversity factor. You have lived in multiple countries abroad, could be a diversity factor. So yes, it may be a diversity factor, but I would just say may not have a lot of weightage because people typically will come in from a variety of. Will you be not considered as a typical Indian engineer? Yes, correct. So that is you do have little. Why there is no transparency on charges for application assistance? So Arvind, one of the reasons why we do not publish the numbers over there is because we want to understand how we can help you, right? So there are packages that go across the spectrum, and we really don't want to offer you something that is not meant for you because these are slightly bespoke. These are customized, and we will give you an offering that is important for your profile, right? So please make sure that you get in touch with us. Is there a minimum GPA percentage? First of all, do not convert your percentage into GPA. Definitely not recommended. In fact, what I would suggest is let it be whatever your mark sheets are. Just take that one sheet transcript, send it to the school. That should be enough. You can also write to us at hello@crackmobile.com. I think Shikla shared the link over here. So please email us your CV and we would be glad to have a look at very specific things. Utkarsh, WES is not required because most US schools know it, but sometimes students do that more from their own personal comfort factor, which you could, if you are okay spending that money, fair enough, but not required if you ask me. MIM plus SEMS now versus 2-year more jobs plus MBA. The thing about MIM versus MBA is MIM as such, all things being equal, is just that you're going to have younger experience, younger people in the class, less experience, MBA more experience, but more expensive. MIM is also cheaper, remember this, correct? Most companies, for example, consulting, they would take an MBA at an associate level, whereas they may take MIM at an analyst level. But eventually, the career path becomes the same. So I would not recommend that, you worry if you have decided that management education is for you and you feel that I cannot, continue being a software engineer for 2 more years of my life. Please do an MIM now. You think, no, Arun, I'm happy in my job. I want to gain experience and want to apply for an MBA 2 years later. That is also perfectly fine. 720 GMAT, my main priority is to get admit to MBA option for me abroad. I think with 2 years experience, because remember your application, your experience is counted as by the time you join the B school. For example, if ISB is looking at they will say you join the school in, let's say, April. So what is going to be your experience by April 2022, right? That's how they calculate the work experience. So I think a lot of options for you. 29 to 30 acceptable age for MSc MIM. Answer is yes. You need to tell a convincing story. There are some schools that are not older applicant friendly. Harvard and Stanford are notorious for it. But apart from that, if you look at an MIT, Wharton, you look at most of the schools in Europe, right? I've had students get into Cambridge Judge 32, 33. So we have had people in the early 30s get it. Place best for MIM in terms of this. Kanishka, I think best is for you to take this question with someone in the team. It may be a best way, because specifically it won't be able to answer it today. How good is experience as administrator? See, any work experience that you do, it is you telling the story. If you are going to portray what I did wasn't a big deal, then it is not going to come through in the essay. So one thing that when we work with students, one thing that we pay special emphasis on is ensure that you are proud of what you have done, because at the end of the day, the B school will believe what you are saying as your story, correct? So please keep that in mind. Can I update the GMAT score after applying with your current score? Technically, yes, but you can apply like a month later. You can say, oh, by the way, you have already rejected me, but here is my 760, right? So within a few weeks, maybe yes, you can. So Payal, that's your question. Rashi has a question. Is there a disadvantage for a student applying for MBA abroad if they have 3 years bachelor's degree? Rashi, this used to be the case many years ago, where US particularly was notorious for 12+3. There may be a few select schools, the same ones that ask for the TOEFL and the IELTS, they are still stuck in the past. I think they have not moved on, where you may have, but 95% of schools will consider a 3-year MBA, a 3-year undergrad. Please do not worry. Sagar has a question, which is, what if I have switched multiple jobs? Is that a bad thing? How do I justify? First of all, accept it, own it, and tell them how you have actually been able to gain a multi-sectoral approach, and why all the mistakes that you did have given you clarity. See, again, don't make it into a mistake. Don't say, oh, I got a wrong job, it sucked, 6 months later I realized and I quit the job. Don't say that, right? Try to portray it, pitch it in a way where it is added to this current position where you are looking at an MBA, where you are making this decision, saying that because of this experience, today I'm better equipped to, do an MBA, correct? So it's very important that you need to be able to tell a story. I know there are a lot of questions that I've gotten, but I'm just going to take the last two. We are right about at the periphery. We just have another couple of minutes. Kanishka, yes, the answer is yes. Shubham, I think I'm going to answer your question. Shubham has a great question, which is, what should a candidate just starting out his career focus on while preparing for an MBA, other than gaining work experience and giving GMAT? My take is, be who you are. I'm going to give you one essay question that was asked, I think, a couple of years ago at Kellogg. And this essay question was, after you've written your goals, written about yourself, written about success, achievement, failure, everything, they had this 200-word essay. And the essay was, tell me something about yourself that would surprise us. Okay, it's a very simple question. Tell me something about yourself that would surprise us. And many a times, students realize at that point that I've done nothing remarkable with my life. So my last submission to you as we close out today's session is, irrespective of how you do in the MBA journey, I think that's a larger question that you need to be asking of yourself, right? Which is, what is it that I want to do? Because unless and until you're clear on that, unless and until you wake up every day thinking about what your goal is, being inspired, being pumped up, being energized by that, an MBA is really a means to get to the end, correct? So try to do something interesting with your life. Try to do something interesting with your career. Don't try to play this game of trying to hack the system, correct? That I will have everything ideal and I will get it. No, it doesn't work that way. Live your life, make your mistakes. It's perfectly okay. But that's really what I would like to say. I'm pretty sure there are a couple of other questions that I perhaps have not been able to answer. I really wish I was able to do it, but thank you so much for your time. I really wish that your questions have gotten answered. Sometimes after the session, students come and say, Arun, maybe we have more questions than when we started with. which is also great because more questions is important because that tells me that you now have a better clarity. I hope the framework that I presented will also give you a better way to sift through the information. I hope to see you sometime. I hope to see you as Crackable students or in any other forum. Till then, goodbye, stay safe, and I hope to catch you later. Bye-bye.